uncomfortably, but from that point on, the community that I had served and still do made a deal with the devil. And that deal was that we would support everything on the conservative agenda, whether or not we had conscientious conflict with it. The means were justified by the end of that.
And it also meant that you had to approach the Supreme Court in a different way, that they had to be influenced?
Well, certainly we had to do everything we could to ensure that the justices would be resolved to begin laying the groundwork for the reversal of Roe. Congresswoman Lee, I'll take you to one very telling event, a meeting inside the U.S. Capitol with Republican Party operatives and a number of leading evangelical spokespersons, institutional leaders, ministry heads from across the country. And in that meeting that I participated in, the conversation went something like this. You guys want Roe v. Wade overturned. We can do that for you. But you take the whole enchilada. You take the whole thing. You take everything else that comes with it. Because if you want Roe gone, you have to work with us. So you take it all. I was at the table and I watched my colleagues nod uncomfortably, but from that point on, the community that I had served and still do made a deal with the devil. And that deal was that we would support everything on the conservative agenda, whether or not we had conscientious conflict with it. The means were justified by the end of that.
And it also meant that you had to approach the Supreme Court in a different way, that they had to be influenced?
Well, certainly we had to do everything we could to ensure that the justices would be resolved to begin laying the groundwork for the reversal of Roe.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I want to drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow.
Hello, everybody. This is the final episode in a series of YouTube channel podcasts on the Poetry of Predicament Podcast. And those of you who have either watched the entirety of the series or at least the first episode of this, the finale, this is really the capper. This is really supposed to bring all the pieces together, primarily with the glue that is the rather macabre glue that brings all four of the groups together that are behind the Trump 2.0 presidency. So let's get on with it. This whole series has been focused on the very real and current agendas, commitments, and actions of the most powerful of the many groups invited by the Conservative Heritage Foundation to be a part of the realization of the Foundation's decades anticipated plan to take over U.S. governance at every level. This plan is called Project 2025. In this special series, we've explored some of the member groups, agendas, commitments, and actions. And in this two-part finale of our special focus series, we're wrapping up what we started in the first part, of course. We are offering concrete examples for each member group in the Project 2025 Dark Alliance, examples of their undeniable buy-in to, one, the superiority of their group, and to some degree, the superiority of the other member groups. Number two, the inferiority of all people outside of their group. Number three, the essential process of dehumanizing all inferior people on Earth, including granting the inferiors life on Earth only as long as they are useful to the goals of their superiors. I am imagining that if you've been in watching these earlier episodes, this has a bit more gravitas. This has a bit more of that kind of rancid core that we started to explore in the first episode of this finale. Those who watched this whole series in part one of the finale will recall that some of the building blocks that we've used to land on this disturbing conclusion. Particularly disturbing was the layout of the disposability of the inferiors or the unhumans. Do we need anything more than the full-throated endorsement of the book UNHUMANS by the sitting Vice President of the U.S. to confirm this conclusion? We could also point to the creation of the largest law enforcement agency in human history, which is, of course, ICE, an agency with a budget now larger than the U.S. Marine Corps, a budget larger than all but 16 nations' entire militaries. We could point to the incredible speed with which this agency has been expanded and funded, i.e., during the first 6 months of the Trump 2.0 presidency, including expanded plans to kidnap up to 3,000 U.S. citizens per day, 1 million per year, and ship them to concentration camps both in the U.S. and abroad. We might mention this funding is also aimed at building a series of new concentration camps for the exclusive use of ICE-related prisoners. We could notice how this agency's mandate includes armed, unidentified SWAT teams being sent to brutally arrest men, women, children, immigrants and citizens alike, all to enforce their alleged immigration violations. Violations, by the way, are not crimes. A parking ticket is a violation. Intentionally driving over people with your car is a crime. It's been made abundantly clear that these kidnappings are not limited to alleged immigration violators. Literally anyone who is seen as unfriendly to our current government administration is now equally vulnerable to being kidnapped and sent to a concentration camp. This may sound a bit extreme. Perhaps the content in this special focus series, and particularly this finale, will help to clarify why we're making this assertion. We welcome any and all comments, agreements, disagreements, and alternative interpretations of our current global state of affairs. In other words, we sincerely invite anyone inclined to disagree with our assertion here to talk us down. Please do comment on any of our videos. Join us for deep and thoughtful conversations about this material in some of our deep dive support groups. We welcome your engagement in this extraordinary and challenging conversation. You'll recall in part 1 of the series finale that we listed again the 4 most powerful groups behind Project 2025. There's, of course, the group that started, initiated, got the whole thing together, and that's the Heritage Foundation. The Christian nationalists, also known as Christo-fascists, made up of mostly evangelicals and Catholics. The second group is the broligarchs, the immensely wealthy and powerful via tech and development of AI, executives of global-scale tech companies, social media, and public and private partnerships. The third bunch is the old-timers, or the industrial titans. The most recent generations of power and wealth behind the oil, manufacturing, arms producing, and other corporate bastions that have cemented in the global domination of the U.S. on the economy around the world for the past 100 years. The fourth group, the ultimate financiers. We've also named these men those who have commodified everything and everyone. The quietest of the list, it is hard to overstate the wealth and influence in all corners of the globe of these ultimate financiers. We're going to be focusing on concrete examples of the control, the influence, the agenda, the dark agenda of each of these 4 groups in this, the finale of the finale. We're going to start here with the Christian nationalists. The clips used here are from a recent interview with the documentary filmmaker Stephen Ujlaki and a person featured in the film, Steve Schmidt. Steve Schmidt is a long-standing political analyst focusing on the deterioration and corruption of the Republican Party in the U.S. The name of the film is Bad Faith. It's a razor-sharp observation of the complete takeover and domination of the Republican Party and U.S. governance at every level by the Christian nationalists through the Heritage Foundation. You can find Bad Faith now on a number of online entertainment platforms if you'd like to watch the entire brief documentary. Now, let's hear from filmmaker Stephen Ujlaki and Steve Schmidt.
Well, Christianity is a faith. Christian nationalism is a political dogma. And when you talk about Christian nationalism, the important word to focus on is nationalism. That's the poisonous word, not Christian. Nationalism, National Socialism. Nationalism is the opposite of patriotism, and Christian nationalism is what fascism looks like with an American character. There's a quote attributed to Sinclair Lewis that he never said, but it's that when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. So what Christian nationalism holds is that there is a small group of people who will tell you that they are acting under the banner of God's providence, that they singularly can interpret his word, and that they will exercise that word through political power. And the point I make in the film is the places where those societies exist, where that holds true, are the most evil places on earth. There is a fictional account of what this looks like. It's The Handmaid's Tale. There is a real world example of what this looks like, and it is the Taliban in Afghanistan. It is a philosophy of subjugation and cruelty in the name of God. And what's particularly perverse about it with regard to Christianity and the invocation of Christ's message is that he, of course, was a great apostle of peace, that he was the man who delivered the Sermon on the Mount. And this movie begins with a Christian nationalist attack on the Capitol. Let me also add, Eric Rudolph, the Atlantic Olympic bomber, is a Christian nationalist. Timothy McVeigh was a Christian nationalist. That when there were American Nazis that filled Madison Square Garden, there were giant banners of George Washington filled with crosses and swastikas. So this is here, it's present, it's real, and it's extremely dangerous. And this film highlights it historically, but also the clear and present dangers that exist in this moment and how it will influence the next.
And Steve, sticking with you before we get back to Mr. Ulaki, why has this Christian nationalism, this movement, been effective as a political tool? Or maybe the reverse, how has it morphed into more of the politics, and why is it so successful? Is it a level of fear behind it, and that's at the core?
Fear is always an essential component of all autocratic movements, but it's important to understand historically. All the way back to the arrival of the Mayflower, you had religious seekers, and you had people on the boat accompanying them who were looking for opportunity that they referred to as strangers. It wasn't very long before there were settlements in Massachusetts, before there were witch hunts. This strain has always existed in American life. When the Ku Klux Klan organized, they did so under the banner of God. And this is important to understand. It doesn't mean that God is corrupt, and it doesn't mean that the teachings of Christ are. It just means that those men are. But this dogma is particularly and peculiarly American. And this is what American fascism looks like. When we think about this, sometimes we look at what German fascism looked like in the 1930s. It's alien, it's distant. Americans would never dress like that and goose step around. It looks different here. And in the 21st century, this is the manifestation of a virus that goes all the way back to the very beginning. And this virus is antithetical to democracy because it says at its core that there is a small group ordained by God who singularly hear his message, and they will use it to rule. That they will not just make the law, they are the law because they are the word. And that is a recipe for evil. This country has a separation of church and state. There is no government-mandated religion. The president is not a religious figure. We are a country of deep faith, but we separate our politics and faith, not faithfulness. There is a place at the table for all Americans of faith to be involved in politics. This is different. This is deadly. This is very dangerous.
And Stephen Ulaki, question to you. Will you talk about what you learned while making this film that really most surprised you?
Well, I think it was the fact that the way the evangelicals were very apolitical, and the Republican strategist Weyrich was trying to figure out a way to get them to join up with the Republican Party. The televangelist leaders had a big problem. They wanted to keep their segregated Christian academies tax-free, but that was no longer possible. So they decided they needed some help from the Republicans. The big problem was this: the evangelicals did not believe in the political arena. They were not voting. They did not vote. So Weyrich told their leaders, tell them that the Republican Party is the party of God and that the Democratic Party is the party of the devil. And then they'll vote the right way. And because these people believed that every word that came from their preachers was directly a word God speaking to them, they did it. They joined up. They got Reagan elected with 22% of the evangelicals voting Republican who hadn't voted before. And of course, now the latest thing with Trump, it went up to like 81%. But it all was part of a business deal. It was all part of a way in which the leaders could get their followers to actually do what they wanted so that the leaders could enjoy potentially the relief from the Supreme Court to overturn all those many things that they were against: integration, women's rights, gay rights, all the things that they were against. They sought help from the Republican Party in return for their votes. So the demonization started way back then. The demonization, and it was not easy because Jimmy Carter was actually a born again, but nevertheless, they followed the lead of their pastors, their preachers who were in it for the money. And today we have demonization, we have division in the country, and it was all because of a business deal that was made between Republican strategists and the televangelists. And that the divisiveness in the country was also part of a plan. The fact that if people feel that they don't trust their institutions, well, at a certain point, the extremists realized that they would have to weaken the institutions to take power. And so the divisiveness, the distrust of institutions that is now current was part of their plan to take power. They had to get rid of majority rule because they knew they would never be the majority. And so that's where we are today.
Well, after that most recent addition to our knowledge of the Christo-fascists, the Christian nationalists from the Heritage Foundation, who really got this whole Project 2025 plan going years and years ago. And in fact, the roots of their program go back more than 50 years in US politics and culture. And hopefully you viewed the whole series that we put together about the roots of fascism in the US 2025, including the information about the Christo-fascists, the Broligarchs, the old timers. This is another word that I use for the titans of industry. Those titans of industry, the fossil fuel industry, the major manufacturing and sales and service organizations that have made up the controlling faction of the industrialized world as it's come out of the USA to dominate the world for the past 100 years. And the last group that is, of course, worth mentioning is the ultimate financiers, those who have taken finance to not only a global level, but an AI-driven universal level that literally commodifies everything and everyone on the planet. The amount of power that's yielded or wielded by each of these four groups is hard to overstate. If you've seen those, all the episodes of this series, you may have a bit more detail about how each of these four groups, invited by the Heritage Foundation, has its own perspective of their group being the only true superior group, superior to all those unwashed masses out in the public, and superior even to the other member groups in this dark alliance of Project 2025. Truly, it is an unusual conglomeration or alliance of very, very powerful elements. A bit on the miraculous side that they've come together and have so seamlessly fallen into place, each of them taking a particular role in the realization of Project 2025 as written by the Heritage Foundation. It's worth noting that each of these powerful groups also has a transcendent vision of their own future, a transcendence, of course, that is only promised to the members of each chosen group. The core focus in this last episode in the Living Resilience video series can be summed up in 3 final questions to help us with our collective sense-making at this rarefied, transcendent level. Question number 1, how did this fascism come on so quickly? Question 2, why are they destroying core societal systems and agencies? 3, why are they infusing this process with so much cruelty, pain, and suffering? The answer to the first question is relatively easy. The Christian nationalists and the old-timer titans of industry have been building the foundation for total authoritarian control for more than a century. With the Christian nationalists wielding the power of dominating through manipulation of faith, powered by white men dominating women and people of color, and the titans of industry controlling narratives, resources, economics, and governments around the world. Activation of the clear and powerful plan for Project 2025 was a predictable success. What was not as predictable was the radical accelerant that would be added by the immense amount of money and often AI-driven elements brought on by the oligarchs and the financiers. The combination of all 4 of these dark alliance groups has quickly become an apparently unstoppable force. For question number 2, why are they destroying core societal systems and agencies? Why they're destroying existing governmental and societal systems and structures. They're destroying existing systems to make room for the new systems built in the image of their own superior humanity and intellect. They're also destroying agencies and systems that somehow offer support and validation to an ideology favored by us unhumans. We're going to get to that in a moment. Question number 3, why are they infusing this process with so much cruelty, pain, and suffering? You know, this one seems best to couch in terms of the millennia-long tradition of dehumanizing the enemy. Whenever one nation has an enemy in another nation, we have long known as human beings that if we can dehumanize that enemy, it will be far easier to have our soldiers brutally wipe out that population, that enemy. It'll be far easier to have the citizenry of our nation be on our side, if you will, as the military going to attack that enemy nation. As it turns out, it seems that the countries that have and the militaries that have the strongest ability to dehumanize the enemy are far more often than not the winner of that war, the country that lays waste to the other, the competitor that wins hands down against the other. If we look at that in terms of how this authoritarian, let's call it fascist government that is now infusing itself into the USA, and how that government will treat all the rest of us, the unhumans that make up the vast majority of this population of the USA. Some of the attributes of that dehumanization that is coming our way and will increase. We, the unhumans, would have to be given no room to discover our ability to feel at home on this planet or in our own communities. We would be given no opportunities to experience our own agency or true creativity. We would be constantly bathed in an atmosphere of fear, domination, and rage. We would never experience ourselves as able to address the larger questions of the world we live in, the world we've been a part of creating for thousands of years. All those solutions must be seen as the exclusive realm of those most wealthy, most powerful, those in control of this fascist government. The most effective way to keep we unhumans in this disempowered state is to continue to keep us in pain and to keep us dehumanized. Do this by normalizing government that lies, steals, is corrupt, manipulates, gaslights, pays less than living wage, refuses or removes benefits like retirement, health care, civil rights. Then they would jack the whole process up by installing a fascist policed state in which all citizens are threatened with unwarranted arrest, kidnapping, extradition to concentration camps, separation of families, evil abuse of police powers, and on the list goes of very current affairs in our country. The last move available on the chessboard for the fascist regime is direct or indirect murder of any citizen at any time. Hard to overstate the existential terror when an all-seeing authoritarian government promises to punish detractors with either unlimited detention in a concentration camp, decimation of a citizen's digital and social identity and viability, or death. These threatened punishments are all in line with the anti-unhuman actions recommended in the book UNHUMANS. Let's break here for a moment to hear some of the text from UNHUMANS. This brief introduction to the book will give you a sense of just how complete and seamless is the vilification of any non-male, non-right-wing, non-Christo-fascist, environment-loving, affordable health care desiring, empathy-wielding person that unhuman is. Somehow, for the authors of Unhuman, and for Steve Bannon, and for Vice President J.D. Vance, we, all of us, Unhumans, are completely expendable, deplorable, evil, anti-civilization, and a scourge upon the earth, and ultimately, we must be eliminated. Now for a few words from Unhuman. From the book Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them. Introduction. Petty resentment and cruelty. Communism is when ugly, deformed freaks make it illegal to be normal, then rob and or kill all successful people out of petty resentment and cruelty. The ideology is all just window dressing. This is not a book about communist ideology. You've read those. This is a book about the communist reality and how to tell when it's coming to a society near you. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. For as long as there have been beauty and truth, love and life, there have also been ugly liars who hate and kill. This is the way of things in all things. There is light and there is dark. Always has been, always will be. Civilization is the superstructure built on law and order that keeps the petty, the resentful, and the cruel away from the rest of us. Some societies have been better at this than others. Those who fail at repelling the repulsive fall to unhumanity, to a state of affairs in which human thriving is impossible and surviving improbable. It doesn't matter what you call these people of anti-civilization. They will change their name, shape, and form as needed, and for their own purposes in their unique time and place. For the last couple centuries, we've known them as communists, socialists with extra steps, and of course, leftists, radicals, and revolutionaries as well. 100 years ago, Marxists, Leninists, then more recently cultural Marxists, even as, without irony and not as a joke, progressives. For the purposes of this book, we will call them the Unhumans. This is a book about unhumans, and this is what they do. With power, unhumans undo civilization itself. They undo order. They undo the basic bonds of society that make communities and nations possible. They destroy the human rights of life, liberty, and property, and undo their own humanity in the process by fully embracing nihilism, cynicism, and envy. Unhuman. Isn't that harsh? Yes, it also happens to be correct. By becoming consumed by nihilism, unhumans oppose everything that makes up humanity. As they are opposed to humanity itself, they place themselves outside of the category completely, in an entirely new misery-driven subdivision, the unhuman. They specifically reject the human rights of others. So if and when they get their way, they will unhuman you too. They convert. That which they cannot convert, they destroy. And they will call this evil good. But that's not how it starts. It all begins with a wedge between two identifiable groups in a given society, the haves and the have-nots, which they prefer to call the oppressor and the oppressed, respectively. Now, many have-nots do aspire to more, and they earn every bit of it. But some of them stop dreaming. Some don't in the first place. And the trouble is, these men and women find each other. They have shared grievances, real and imagined, and then they unite. There are parades and protests, then power. All of a sudden, it's theirs, all theirs. Then they rob, they kill. Any ideology preached along the way is just window dressing. They don't believe what they say. They don't care about winning debates. They don't even want equality. They just want an excuse to destroy everything. They want an excuse to destroy you. That is what they do. And this book is how we stop them. All right, so we've heard a little bit from Unhuman, the atrocious book that has been evidently quite well received in the Republican Party and amongst the Christian nationalists and the Broligarchs at the very least, if not all four of these primary groups that are supporting Project 2025 and its realization in Trump 2.0. So I find that book so badly written that it's a little bit difficult to just get the gravitas, get the impact truly of what is being said. It is that these folks really don't care about human beings. There's a reason why they're attacking DEI. There's a reason why Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan and told him how it was obvious to him that empathy is a bug in the human system, not a feature. So I want to give us a couple of examples, or at least one example from each of these four groups of just how little they care about the you and me, about the unhuman, about anybody who isn't cut out of the same cloth in exactly the same pattern as they are, whether they're Christian nationalists, they're Broligarchs, they're the titans of industry, or they're the financiers. Chances are they're going to be white and male of a certain age. They're going to have a certain sexual orientation, certain orientation toward their gender identity, and so on. It's going to be pretty clear soon, if it's not clear for everybody watching this now, that there is a deep racism. There's a deep misogyny. There's a deep inclination toward the decimation of cultures. So, for instance, the indigenous cultures to Turtle Island that are a huge part of the blind spot being painted darkly over American history through this Heritage Foundation effort and so on. So I want to start us out with an example of the Broligarchs and how they express their level of disrespect and disregard for those unhumans, those unwashed masses, those lesser or inferior people in the world. There are a number of ways in which we could show this disdain that the oligarchs have and show for us unhumans. We could talk about the things on the horizon like AI and the promise of it to take at least 20% of all jobs in the USA in the next 5 years, and an estimate of up to 50% within 10 years, and more in shorter chunks of time as time goes on. That will be devastating. No matter how you slice it, that will be devastating. There will be more reports from here and undoubtedly from everybody else on the internet as well as those things unfold. But I'm really wanting to focus this particular example on the zero-sum global existential level competition for AI dominance amongst the oligarchs themselves, the billionaires, and the companies that they own, manage, run, that are all hot in the competition for AI dominance. And this is one of the most brilliant futurists and most brilliant experts in the field of existential risk alive today. Is Daniel Schmachtenberger, and one of his many conversations with podcaster Nate Hagens. And this particular one is one in which Nate is kind of being a foil for Daniel Schmachtenberger speaking, as is often the case. And Nate has asked, well, if there's such a massive use of a consumption of energy to run these zero-sum competitions to eventually find, discover, and instantiate the newly found AI dominant models. And if the process of those models doing the work that they're then charged with doing, if that has the possibility of destroying massive amounts, consuming massive amounts of energy and resources in order to produce the results that they're being charged with producing, what happens to our environment? What happens to redwood trees and butterflies and so on? Nate is trying so hard through his work in his podcasts to invite forward, encourage forward a new generation of, and hopefully a world full of activists and people active in regeneration, in creating a new way of human beings being on this planet. What about all that if AI is supposedly going to be taking all of these resources to create what these oligarchs are telling it to create? And we will just in a few moments, we'll go to a clip in which Daniel Schmachtenberger speaks about an imagined conversation with AI engineers, AI oligarchs responding to that kind of a question, of what about our precious world and our precious environment and habitat? What will happen to that if you are so embroiled in this zero-sum AI extravaganza? So I hope you will learn and be moved in a way similar to the way I have been while watching this conversation. I've watched it many times now, and I, like Nate Hagens in this clip, find myself feeling ill, that the stakes are unfathomably high, and the risks are devastatingly high. So I invite you to just start to get a sense of one way the utter disdain for human life on this planet, not to mention the beyond human life on this planet, of the broligarchs as they engage with this neck and neck, zero-sum existential competition for AI dominance.
Forward. I'm gonna hold on to that.
So wait, you asked the question about redwood trees and bees and nature and whatever.
Yes.
And so the deepest answer is like the AGI question long term is those are all made of atoms and have energy and stuff in them. The answer that would be given probably, so if you're focused on AI military dominance, so after China did its military drill near Taiwan as a kind of a punishment to Taiwan last month, the U.S. Pacific Naval Commander initiated Operation Hellscape. Maybe some of the people have seen. I like that it's not like called Operation Mockingbird or something. It's just Operation Hellscape, just kind of like openly acknowledging. And Operation Hellscape is fill the Taiwan Straits with so many automated robotic kill drones that anything that moves in there is dead instantly. And okay, so that's now, right? Like that's not in the future, that's now. If people have not watched Anduril videos on what the state of integrated automated kill webs are and stuff like that, it's worth watching. So if you're focused on imminent World War III, where AI is the kind of primary game changer applied to everything, and someone says, but what about bees and redwood trees? Then you're like, you can focus on irrelevant shit because you aren't actually playing to win. But there's really only one game that matters right now, and it doesn't have anything to do with bees or redwood trees. And I have a limited amount of attention, and all of my attention is allocated to what it must be allocated to. Now, the answer that they would give publicly would be more like, if you want to protect bees and redwood trees, you better support that we get to AGI dominance first, because we are the good guys and the Chinese are the bad guys, and we will protect environmental laws and et cetera, et cetera. So the only way to care about those things is to support us in our AGI dominance.
I'm actually feeling somewhat ill. Like I have a pit in my stomach right now. I knew some of these things, but this is just, and by the way, the reason that you and I decided to schedule this is because we believe that the environmental movement, the climate movement, is unaware of the magnitude of impact that artificial intelligence will have on the issues that we care about. But I have to ask you a question first to finish this section, which is I fear your answer. But in the same way that the movie Idiocracy was a comedy and it ended up being kind of a documentary, Black Mirror was like this futuristic dystopian thing, but that actually is starting to be a reality with some of the things that were described in that show. So here's my question. I'm actually afraid to ask you this, but we're doing this. I'm doing this podcast. I'm trying to pass the pro-social baton to more humans to change the initial conditions of the future and to kind of fight power in service of life. But based on what you're telling me, what if 95% of humans absolutely understand and concur about these risks? Are they just like gnats that can be swatted away because of the power dynamics that exist in this industry and what's happening?
Not yet, but very soon. which is why now is important to talk about this.
From the universe and the planet and the world and the neighborhood of the broligarchs, we're going to now shift to the titans of industry, who, after 100 years of political control and global CIA and market control, they always get what they want. The titans of industry have more than 100 years of remarkable control and manipulation of politics, markets, cultures around the world, so that they become more and more compliant with and supportive of the U.S. version of the marketplace, one in which the U.S. always has the upper hand, always sets the tone and sets the pace and basically sets the rules of the marketplace anywhere in the world. One aspect of these titans of industry that is really at the center of it all, of everything that we're talking about, whether it's broligarchs or Christian nationalists or financiers, one of the core elements that they all share the wealth in, and that is the use of fossil fuels. So the fossil fuel industry is one of the core industries that we are calling here the titans of industry. And one of the subtlest yet right out in the open examples of the amount of power they wield and the amount of subtle and propagandistic control that they wield is the 30 plus years now of the Conference of Parties meetings that have happened with regard to climate change under the auspices of the UN. It is clear to me, having written my book, The Impossible Conversation, it was clear to me that the whole measure of climate change as the pivotal issue that we would focus on for these 30 years was itself an immensely contrived measure. This is not the place to go into all of, from everything from overshoot to species extinction to habitat destruction and so on. Just let it be said that it is very interesting that those COP meetings were chosen to be a place to report out the measures of this one type of emissions from the use of fossil fuels, of course, that being CO2 in the atmosphere. What I ask you to just consider for this particular presentation is that was a very successful construct made possible through the efforts of the fossil fuel industry, amongst others, as a complete subterfuge, as a complete camouflage to their intention to never do a damn thing about climate change, to never do a damn thing to slow down the world's consumption of fossil fuels. Never. And so I just invite you to consider that. The clips I'm about to show you are about, well, it's a really odd character that I'm going to be playing a clip of, is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is, of course, a Republican, long-standing Republican in the USA, and he has held public office, of course, as being the governor of California. And he's quite an astute businessman, quite a wealthy individual. And he is a steadfast Republican. No matter how bizarre the Republican Party gets, he still hangs in there with them. And in this clip, he's going to make some assertions about the fossil fuel industry and how Schwarzenegger has one razor sharp accusation for the entire fossil fuel industry. That is that they are playing out of the identical playbook of a few decades back when the cigarette industry, the tobacco industry, was found to be maliciously spreading disinformation in order to continue to sell their product and basically lie to the public about the addictive nature of that tobacco product. They, of course, were found guilty, and they were forced to pay the largest settlement of its kind in the history of the planet. And basically, Arnold Schwarzenegger is accusing the fossil fuel industry of a very similar violation or criminal behavior in how they have distorted the information that was to be distributed to the public about the damage being done and projected to be done by the consumption, the continued consumption of fossil fuels. And the word that Arnold Schwarzenegger uses to summarize his accusation for the fossil fuel industry is murder. To give you some indication of how much disregard, how much disdain the fossil fuel industry has for the global public, for the US public, for the average person in the world, for the unhuman population of the world, for the inferior population of the world. It's a stark and important accusation. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. In fact, I'm going to give you the spoiler right now. This clip that I'm playing of Arnold Schwarzenegger speaking is from approximately 5 years ago. Might be a little bit more. Might be somewhere in the vicinity of 2018. I'm sorry, I don't remember. The long and short of the Arnold Schwarzenegger accusations is that they never came to anything. They were never, the fossil fuel industries are indeed being taken to court for similar charges and accusations, but Arnold Schwarzenegger's plans for going after those fossil fuel corporations has not panned out to date. So a brief tour of the neighborhood filled with disdain that is inhabited by the titans of industry.
And with the Austrian government. The idea is because Austria is really extraordinarily good with the environment. And they said, why don't we do that? California is like #1 with environmental issues. Austria is leading. In Europe, why don't we form a partnership between California and Austria? And so this is what this is about, is to help the UN and to help the international treaty, COP21, which is the international agreement of all the countries to go and to reduce greenhouse gases all over the world. And I think it's just a very, very important thing to do. And I think it is also important that for people to really focus on that issue, because this is no different than the smoking issue. The tobacco industry knew for years and years and years and decades that smoking would harm people, would kill people, would create cancer, and they were hiding that fact from the people and denied it. And then eventually they were taken to court and they had to pay hundreds of billions of dollars because of that. Because they knew. And so the same thing is now with the oil companies. The oil companies, because people don't know that, but the oil companies knew from 1959 on, they did their own study and knew there will be global warming and climate change happening because of fossil fuels. And on top of it, it will be risky for people's lives, that it will kill people and they will get cancer and all this. All of this stuff the oil companies knew, and they kept hiding it from the people. This is why we are now talking to law firms to go and do exactly the same thing as they've done in the tobacco industry, where we sue the oil companies for knowingly killing people all over the world. There's 7 to 9 million people dying every year because of pollution, because of fossil fuels.
That's some big news. You're going to back class action suits against.
We're going to go after them, and we're going to be in there like an Alabama tick. That I can promise you, because to me it is absolutely irresponsible to know that your product is killing people and to not have a warning label on it like they do in tobacco. They had to settle and they had to put a warning label on it. If you smoke, it will kill you. If you smoke, you will get cancer. It has a warning label. Every gas station should have a warning label on it. Every car should have a warning label. Every product that has fossil fuels in it should have a warning label on it. We should let people know so they understand that this is bad and they can go to an alternative route, which is to go to a combustion engine. This is a hydrogen engine, or to electric cars or hybrid cars or something that will reduce the pollution in America and around the world.
So when do you expect to file?
Well, we don't know yet exactly, and we don't want to signal our moves, but I mean, one thing I can tell you, this is exactly what's going to come, because I don't think there's any different that if you walk into a room and you know you're going to kill someone, it's first-degree murder. I think it's the same thing with the oil companies. They know they're killing people, and they continue doing the same thing over and over and selling it. So I think something needs to be done about it.
All right, let's end on.
Well, I was pointing to him, but that's all right. Since you're there, let's do this one, and then we'll go there.
Hi, I'm David Fenton. Mr. Tillerson, I want to talk about science and risk. And I agree with you, that's the way we must proceed. So, as you know, it's a basic fact of physics that CO2 traps heat, and too much CO2 will mean it'll get too hot, and we will face enormous risks as a result of this, not only to our way of life, but to the world economy. It will be devastating. The seas will rise, the coastlines will be unstable for generations. The price of food will go crazy. This is what we face, and we all know it. Now, so my question for you, since we all know this knowledge, we're a little in denial of it. You know, if we burn all these reserves you talk about, you can kiss future generations goodbye. Now, maybe we'll find a solution to take it out of the air, but as you know, we don't have one. So what are you going to do about this? We need your help to do something about this.
Well, let me say that we have studied that issue and continue to study it as well. We are and have been longtime participants in the IPCC panels. We author many of the IPCC subcommittee papers, and we peer review most of them. So we are very current on the science, our understanding of the science, and importantly, and this is where I'm going to take exception to something you've said, the competency of the models to predict the future. We've been working with a very good team at MIT now for more than 20 years on this area of modeling climate, which, since obviously it's an area of great interest to you, you know and have to know the competencies of the models are not particularly good. Now, you can plug in assumptions on many elements of the climate system that we cannot model, and you know what they all are. We cannot model aerosols, we cannot model clouds, which are big, big factors in how the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere affect temperatures at surface level. The models we need, and we are putting a lot of money supporting people and continuing to work on these models, try and become more competent with the models. But our ability to predict with any accuracy what the future is going to be is really pretty limited. So our approach is we do look at the range of the outcomes and try and understand the consequences of that. And clearly there's going to be an impact. So I'm not disputing that increasing CO2 emissions in the atmosphere is going to have an impact. It'll have a warming impact. How large it is what is very hard for anyone to predict. And depending on how large it is, then projects how dire the consequences are. As we have looked at the most recent studies coming out in the IPCC reports, which I've seen the drafts, and I can't say too much because they're not out yet. But when you predict things like sea level rise, you get numbers all over the map. If you take what I would call a reasonable scientific approach to that, we believe those consequences are manageable. They do require us to begin to exert or spend more policy effort on adaptation. What do you want to do if we think the future has sea level rising 4 inches, 6 inches? Where are the impacted areas, and what do you want to do to adapt to that? And as human beings, as a species, that's why we're all still here. We have spent our entire existence adapting. Okay, so we will adapt to this. Changes to weather patterns that move crop production areas around, we'll adapt to that. It's an engineering problem, and it has engineering solutions. And so I don't, the fear factor that people want to throw out there to say we just have to stop this, I do not accept. I do believe we have to be efficient and we have to manage it, but we also need to look at the other side of the engineering solution, which is how are we going to adapt to it? And there are solutions. It's not a problem that we can't solve.
But let's stick with that for just a second. I mean, ExxonMobil, before you became CEO, was very aggressive and overt in challenging and mounting a public relations campaign against the sorts of things that Mr. Fenton just managed. You changed that when you came in. But I guess the question I'd ask you, I was at my daughter's graduation last weekend, and the graduation speaker said that global warming is the great challenge of your generation. Do you agree with that? Would you agree that it's in at least one of the top 5 challenges of the generation, or do you personally think that it's been way overblown?
No, I think it's a great challenge, but I think it's a question back to priorities. And I think, as I just described, based on our understanding of the system and the models and the science, and that there are engineering solutions to adapting, that we think it's solvable. And I think there are much more pressing priorities that we as a human being race and society need to deal with. There are still hundreds of millions, billions of people living in abject poverty around the world. They need electricity. They need electricity they can count on, that they can afford. They need fuel to cook their food on that's not animal dung. There are more people's health being dramatically affected because they don't even have access to fossil fuels to burn. They love to burn fossil fuels because their quality of life would rise immeasurably, and their quality of health and the health of their children and their future would rise immeasurably. You'd save millions upon millions of lives by making fossil fuels more available to a lot of the part of the world that doesn't have it. And do it in the most efficient ways using the most efficient technologies we have today. And we continue and have for many, many years talked on our Energy Outlook about the importance of ongoing energy efficiency, continuing to carry out economic activity with a lower energy intensity. And we've been very good as a country at doing that. We've been very good globally at doing that, and there's more potential in it.
Thank you for watching this video all the way through. This may well be the last long form video that we do here in Living Resilience and the Poetry of Predicament podcast. Kind of a big promise, and I don't know that I'm going to keep it. There will probably be issues from time to time that require, longer form. But know that it is our commitment here to reduce our contribution to the fire hose to the face of too much content all the time that we are all submerged in every day. I hope the message has gotten through. It's a bit difficult to know because this again is the most disturbing content I've ever had to deal with, and truthfully I believe this is the most dangerous content and toxic content that humanity's ever had to face. Certainly not country by country, millennia by millennia. There have been plenty of instances at a smaller scale of authoritarian regimes, of the greed of business and taking over the priority of human beings taking care of each other, taking care of themselves, taking care of the planet. But never have we had a time when, at a global scale, everything is at stake. Everything. This is an existential polycrisis that humanity has never seen before. It was my intention to really put a strong finishing note on this series about the roots of fascism in the US in 2025, and particularly here in the finale about this dehumanization going on by all those in power that I'm aware of here in the USA and their similar cohort around the world who basically have lots of money, lots of power, and have no intention of including in any kind of equitable way the rest of the people on the planet, meaning this 1/10 or whatever the ridiculously small number of people in power is, and all the rest of us, the 99.99 whatever, we are the unhumans. We are the ones to be disdained, to be used as resources for only as long as we produce profit for them. And we are absolutely disposable beyond that point. So this is a brutally important moment in human history, not just the USA and our particular moment of authoritarian regime infusion. So again, thank you. Thank you for watching. I hope you will feel inclined in some way to join us from time to time in our Living Resilience online community space. It's a place where people who are brand new to this idea of the human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And it's also a space for people who have been around this conversation for years or even decades. We're hoping that we can come together and be of some service to one another, hold space for one another, for the very difficult emotions that can be stirred in this process of being alive right now, and also to face the immense challenges of how, if we are not going to participate in this kind of system anymore, or if this is something that's intolerable anymore, then what? How do we generate alternatives? How do we do that infamous new level of thinking that is attributed to Albert Einstein, that is in which he is alleged to have said that we cannot find solutions for the problems that we've created if we're using the same level of thinking that was used to create those very problems. So how do we come together in a way that truly new ways of thinking are generated? How do we come together in ways that allow us to generate new ways of relating? Because clearly, speaking strictly for the USA at this moment, we have forgotten how to relate. We don't know how to connect with one another at scale. And, heck, we're on the verge of a civil war, says remarkably conservative voices are saying that. So we invite you to come put your toe in the water here with Living Resilience, with the Poetry of Predicament podcast, with the support resources, with the online courses, with many opportunities for us to expand our capacities to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors. Like, I think if you look around, certainly many of the people that I talk with, interact with, agree that we are a country that is no longer able to be present for a number of reasons. And so when we're not present, when we're dysregulated, when we're collectively dysregulated, when we're off center, how do we bring ourselves back? How do we do that individually? And how do we do that together? So thank you. That's it for this series on the roots of fascism in the US in 2025. Hope to see you in one of our courses, all the information about how to connect with us and how to be a part of Living Resilience and the online community space, be a part of our courses or support groups. All that information's in the show notes. So again, my thanks, and especially my thanks for those who have chosen to contribute on a regular basis financially through that online community space. Thank you. And thank you for your attention, whether or not you contribute. This is a time to be coming together at every level, and it has really nothing to do with financial contribution. It has everything to do with human beings choosing new ways of being together. Look forward to meeting you soon, seeing you soon. Bye.
And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, 'cause I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Ow!